Good day, everybody. Welcome to today's video. My 2014 Wrangler JKU. We're going to be doing some front brake lines. And I'm going to be replacing them with these Teraflex 435310 JK 26-inch front brake line kit with hardware. The one thing you're going to find out with Teraflex, what I really like about them, is that their instructions are second to none when it comes to assembling any of their products. Going over the manual, tells you step by step what you have to do. So basically anybody can do them and shouldn't have any issues unless you're dealing, of course, with corroded lines. Two things we're going to do before we start off. Make sure the cap is loose. And make sure you have a collection bucket down below. Because what I'm going to do, first off, is this is the brake line right here. We're going to remove it from there. But we're going to disconnect everything it's attached to along the way. As you can see, the brake line and the ABS line are all separated, so already start removing it. I'm going to remove the Banjo bolt from the brake line there and pull it out and let the oil drain in the bucket. Even though the master cylinder is empty, there will be some fluid in this as well, especially draining the line out, which won't take long. And this Banjo bolt seems to be stuck in there because of that copper washer, of course. In this case, both copper washers were stuck in the Banjo bolt, so I'm just trying to use a screwdriver to pry it off. Wasn't working too well, so I grabbed a pair of pliers, a pair of cutters, and the copper is malleable, so it cuts pretty easy, and then I was able to get it off. It fought me to the death, but I managed to get it. But copper washer, like I said, is still stuck on the opposite side, and I just stuck it in a vise and was able to pop it off. You need to make sure those are removed before the installation. Alright, Banjo bolt is out. Washers are off. Let's see if this one here will come apart a little bit easier. I'm gonna use my 12 mil here. It's the same thing. It's going to stay in there and twist. So a lot of people probably aren't going to experience this, that the brake line is seized, and if you try to remove it, it's going to twist the hard line and wreck it. But I'm going to show you a little trick on how to get around this without ruining the brake line, and it involves being pretty creative. The brake line is free, so you want to remove the bolt. It's holding the retainer, which holds the brake line in place. Put some channel locks on the brake line. Now this part is very important. You need to hold the ferro or the brake nut tight so the line does not twist, and then turn it out from the bottom. So you're actually physically rotating the whole brake line around until you can pop it off. But we're not fixed yet. You can see right there, that brake line nut is still not turning. Now this is where you got to be savage and you got to be creative and not go too crazy. I took a little bit of a torch there and I'm heating her up. I want to heat her up because it expands the metal, and once the metal expands, in theory you should be able to spin the nut then. So I'm just heating her up a little bit, not too much, but as you can see, the brake fluid's already starting to catch on fire. Shut her down, put it out, and now I sprayed it. Well, actually, I tested to make sure that it was spinning first. Now, WD-40 is flammable, and I'm spraying it with WD-40, so there's a good chance it may catch on fire. So if you do this method, use extreme caution, because you may burn your Jeep down. So anyways, now that I sprayed it down, I'm continuing to work the nut to make sure that it's going to stay free. Now we're back to the copper washer, so remember, copper washer, that, copper washer. It's important. So I take this, remember, 23 foot-pounds. There we go. Just torqued. I want to leave it just a little bit loose. That way I can thread this up in there. And the reason why I leave it loose is that so you can get the brake line started. And once you get the brake line started, you can put that locking clip in. I just use a hammer to tap it in place. Once you got that clip in place, take your wrench, tighten up the brake line until it gets tight, and then use another wrench to tighten it up, and then lastly, finish tightening up the bolt that holds that bracket in place. Now that the brake line is on, torqued down, you do need to tie up your ABS line and your brake line. I got this Teraflex brake anchor. Zip tie them all together so they're not going to get caught up in the suspension or tire, and then be ready to start bleeding the brakes. All the brake lines and ABS lines are tied up. I got the brake fluid over there so we can start filling up the master cylinder and bleeding the brakes. Now, of course, when you bleed the brakes, you always got to start at the furthest and work your way closest. So passenger rear, passenger front, driver front. Let's fill up the master cylinder with my brake fluid I got. Now, since I had the front brake lines off, I'm going to let that bleed for a bit, just to make sure that there's no air pockets in there. Seems to have a pretty good flow now. Always make sure to torque your tires when you're done and check them after 100 kilometers. Double check and make sure the ABS and brake line's not going to interfere with anything. There we are, Jeep's all back together. Tires are torqued, brake fluid's topped up, everything is bled. The Teraflex brake lines went in okay, except for the seized brake fitting, which posed a little bit of a problem, but we overcame that. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you have any questions or comments, post them below. I'll see you guys in the next one.